All right, man. I'm ready. I'm good whenever you are.
Okay. Oh, real quick, I want to use this for a thumbnail. Do a big bicep flex. I'll screenshot it. There we go. Oh, making it rain. Okay, man, making it snow in Canada.
That
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 screenshot it for you. That's
yeah,
your
that
thumbnail.
or my bicep flex was so depressing it had to rain.
I didn't get any reaction on my end, so I mean, hey, that's
Funny.
something. Well, maybe we'll just use that for the intro, Tyler, right?
I think we
So,
have to.
all
I
right,
think we have
guys.
to.
That's hilarious. So, contest prep talk episode 2 with my coach and colleague, Tyler Wiebe. What's going on, Tyler?
Not much, man. Just like we were kind of talking about, busy week, training, coaching, family
Yeah,
stuff. It's all
I
good though.
gotcha. Yeah, and I find it funny how like we do the intro and then like we pretend we haven't been talking yet, even though we've already been talking for a little bit. But anyway, we're 4 weeks in the prep, right? So we're doing our, once monthly kind of catch up, see how things are going with prep, and then pick a few relevant topics to talk about, prep related that we could tie into any competitors out there, and even just, lifestyle people,
Totally.
So I guess we could start with a little bit of a review, right? And then we could get into today's topics, right? So, um, the first thing that is important, I think, to look at is, and we're going to talk about this some more, but, rates of weight loss is not always going to be super fast, right? Like this month, I was pointing out the exact numbers. July 1st, I started to cut, and it's August 1st today. So we're exactly 30 days in, or 32, something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, something like that. July 1st, 148.3 on average in terms of scale weight, 32 inches on my waist. July the 28th, so my last check-in, was 146 on average, and 31 and 116th on the waist. So that's just over 2 pounds down on the scale,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, but, there's a little more to it, right? So what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah. And I think this is a really important topic for a lot of people to consider that and I think we may have briefly touched on it in the first video, but it's where someone is starting their fat loss phase. And then even as well as, for a competitor or, someone who is getting to a point where they are much leaner. And we're starting to talk about, in that 10% or less body fat, that's what we're really kind of looking at is that half a pound, 1 pound on someone who is at that level of leanness percentage, relative percentage body fat is going to be much more noticeable than, say, someone who has 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose. You're not going to
Yeah.
really notice 1 pound, right? And so people can maybe get a little scared of like, oh, I'm not losing maybe what I would expect, but we do need to make sure we're considering that relative body fat percentage. And so for you, you didn't gain a lot of body fat in your off season. Like you were almost at a point just starting our prep, you could probably step on stage and do okay. Like you were still pretty
Yeah.
lean. And so for us, we're not looking for 1, 2 pounds a week that I might look for, you would look for in someone else at a different starting position. Half a pound a week is going to be pretty good for us because that is going to be one, a much bigger relative percentage, and two, we're going to help hopefully and should retain a bit more muscle with a slower percentage. And so
Sure.
that's kind of what we're looking at, and we're not going to be overly concerned as long as we're kind of continually seeing that trend.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm totally in agreement with you too, and it's like since I have a dieting experience to step on stage, like we have a ballpark of where we're going with weight, right? Like it'd be nice to be like, oh, okay, uh 6, 8 months, whatever it has been, I think about 8 months since my show, in building, right, bring calories up, all sort of thing. Oh, it'll be nice. Oh, we put on 10 pounds of muscle. Okay, we're just about there. No, I still got a good 10 pounds or so to go because just to give everyone perspective, and like I've been saying all along, both with my YouTube updates I do on my Instagram and everything, like I'm putting all the information out there, like my numbers, cardio, calories, all that stuff. Like my last show, and we were working together for that. 136 was my scale weight before we did the carb load. So averaging in at 136, I still got 10 pounds to go, right? But we don't want this, like you said, 4 pounds lost on the scale one week, right? Because that means, hey, maybe I didn't eat anything and I just lost a bunch of muscle, right? And that
Yeah.
wouldn't be good, right? So, and just a quick rewind before we keep going, just so everyone knows, like we started our cut at a macro intake range of 300 carb, 185 protein, 60 fat, which is like super easy, right? Like I can't really complain about that. But we had a stall out there in late July, so you made the adjustment with calories to bring them down to 250 carb, keep protein constant on 185, and fats down to 50. So we gave it time, right? It wasn't just like we saw a stall out for 2 days, like, oh, let's make an adjustment. I mean, it was 3 solid weeks that we kept calories the same. We made a little bit of progress, but we made the adjustment from there. Well, what's your rationale for, the length of time for keeping calories in a spot, for someone who has contest prep related goals and maybe even just a general, lifestyle individual before making an adjustment?
I mean, I think in its simplest form, it's like the longer I can keep someone at higher calories while still losing body fat, the better we're just going to be off in the long run, right? Like the better your recovery is going to be, the better your sleep quality is going to be, the better your stress management, your training, your energy, all your consistency. Like it's just giving us more run room to eventually push because we're going to have to do that at some point. Like that is just going to be the nature of the beast of a
Yeah.
contest prep or a long dieting phase or whatever that is going to be. And so anytime we're going to make a cut and start bringing calories down, the closer we're getting to the end of a diet or running someone into the ground, something along those lines. Now, certainly prep is a different animal compared to say, hey, we're going to be dieting for 6 months and we want to drop 30 pounds. Like it is just going to look different. And at a certain point in prep, you are just going to be kind of miserable and you're just going to have to deal with it. Like that is just part of this process because we're getting to a leanness that the body doesn't necessarily want to be. And so you do
Right.
have to push it past a certain point. But I still, especially at the beginning in those first few weeks, if I can squeeze as much as I can out in the beginning before I start pushing somebody, the better off we're going to be. Now, the length of time, again, can be dependent, from person to person,
Oh yeah.
timeline, whatever. But on average, at a minimum, I would say I always want to see at least 2 weeks of someone completely stalled out before I'm going to make any changes. 1 week, maybe you didn't get some great sleep. Maybe your stress was a little high. Maybe you did overeat just a little bit a couple of days, right? Like life happens, and that is just going to occur. And so I want to be sure we've actually plateaued because of all of those reasons I just mentioned. Because just because the scale weight doesn't come down in 1 week doesn't mean that the body's just stopped processing and losing body fat. And so
Sure.
2, 3 weeks is typically going to be that perfect timeline where it's like, all right, now we've got to push. And I know sometimes people can be a little bit impatient with that, but again, just for those reasons I mentioned, it's really trying to set up someone for the long term as well.
Yeah, no, that's important. It's like that's why it's important to give yourself time in a contest prep to get ready, right? Like I've just given myself 16 weeks here, I think, on
Yeah.
total, right? And I'm already in decent shape, right? So, it's not just going to happen in a few weeks. Like I've had people ask me before, and like let's say I'm training someone in person and they'd be like, hey, I think I could get shredded in 4 weeks if I do something really extreme. I'm like, I mean,
Probably.
Yeah, but probably, but also probably not, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
there's a lot more weight that we unfortunately have to lose, right? If we want to get to that ultra, like, stage lean look, right? So, yeah, that's definitely important there. But what is, and we're talking about it, but like if someone is like, in that, I don't know, 10-12% look range, right? Like what's like the length of time is, let's just say the calories are adequate, right? They're not just like deep in the where they would need to reverse and all that. What's like the length of time that you typically look for? You go, okay, 16, 20 weeks, a little bit more, a little bit less. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the longer the better. Honestly,
Yeah,
it's always gonna have that benefit of taking that time, and especially if you are a serious competitor, right? And like this is just kind of your life, your goals, right? Like, and this is something that you are really into. The length of time to get ready for a show, in a sense, shouldn't really matter to you. Obviously, there's kind of, I think, a lot of caveats that can kind of go into it, and we're not going to get into that today. But I would say at a minimum 16 weeks, if not maybe even 24 weeks. Because if we can get that person then ready early, we can then even transition into kind of this metabolic building phase and even potentially then work that person back up to maintenance calories, rebuild any of that lean tissue that you are going to lose in a prep, especially as a natural competitor. Is just going to happen. You can't avoid it. And
right,
so the more we can do something like that, the better that person is going to look on stage because now you're filling back out. You can do some mock peak weeks. You can see how that person responds to this progressive linear load as a peak week. How do they respond to X amount of carbs? Test some sodium and water. Like what's going to bring out that best look? Because when you do get to, sub 5% body fat, let's say, the body can change hour by hour depending on sodium, water, food. And so to be able to have that kind of data and take pictures and see how that person looks hard, soft, hopefully you're not spilling over.
right,
It's going to allow you then as a coach and a client together to hone in on that best look. And that doesn't happen with just one show. Like it takes multiple shows together to really find that kind of magical piece, if you will. Like we can certainly get close to that first show if you can, understand the biological principles and science behind peak week, but there's still always going to be those tweaks you can do to make things even better as you progress forward. So I'm always a big fan of more time is better than less.
yeah. Gotta give yourself time. Yeah, and for sure, there's so many variables, right? Especially when you get down to it. But at the end of the day, you gotta be super lean, right? And that's where the whole loading process will actually make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So, I kind of think that kind of brings us into our next topic of the importance of being at maintenance for a while, just kind of cruising at a higher intake range before starting a deficit. Like, there's no magical time per se,
Yeah.
but if you're trying to compete and try and word this right, and like not exactly a close proximity, but it's like, okay, I want to compete 1 year and then compete about a year later, which I'm doing now, right? Like, what is like your thought process in terms of like, okay, what's a good duration of time to be at a higher intake range before dipping down again, so that the body will actually respond? Because you can't just go all right up and then right back down because your body was used to being low, right? So, your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people a minimum of a year. Like that is kind of almost a minimum timeline. Again, if this is something that we want to be serious about, we want to do well with, and that kind of, thought process, like it does take so much time to even build muscle. Like, metabolism aside, like that only takes about 3 months for the metabolism roughly to kind of get back to where things were, right? Like, so it doesn't take a super long time for us to, I mean, I hate the term, but heal the metabolism,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As much as, metabolic damage isn't necessarily a real thing other than some extreme cases. that is a quick part. And so it really is then the body building, right? This is a sport of body
Yeah.
building, not body cutting, as much as being super lean is important. And so when we kind of look at that, it does just take a long time, especially in the men's side, right? There's just going to be that different criteria that we're looking for, and it's going to be size, right? Like symmetry
Definitely.
obviously is important, but we need that size. And so 1, 2, 3 years to really just soak in all of that muscle, the carbohydrates, and just really kind of take the time to build that foundation, to put on a little extra fluff, if you will, to make sure that
Yeah.
that time you do come in, we're going to have a much, much more improved physique on the muscle side of things.
Right. No, that's definitely true, right? Because it's not like you said, it's bodybuilding. It's not body retention or body cutting, that you're always focusing on. But yeah, I kind of wonder, like, we're all kind of like a science experiment in a way, right? When you go through a cutting phase and all that. Like, I wonder, like, I wonder how my body responded at that, like, initial deficit if I was at higher calories for a longer time, right? It's interesting. I mean, starting in a leaner place is going to make a difference, but it is kind of interesting to kick around in the back of your mind. But
Yeah, I
so
mean,
yeah,
yeah, like I would imagine and assume things would have gone roughly the same, right?
yeah,
You're still gonna have to create whenever you cut. You just have to be that much more aggressive because of those initial adaptations. And so it's all going to be relative from a genetic standpoint of where someone's maintenance calories are. Like that is going to be largely genetically determined, and it doesn't really change throughout the course of your life, right? Like people will say, oh, my metabolism slowed down. Well, no, it doesn't. You just don't move as much as you used to, and your eating habits never changed, actually. Like
right,
that's
yeah,
where a lot of that is actually coming from. Like, yes, there is some down regulation as you get older, but it's certainly not as much as I think people believe. So it's all going to be relative at a certain point where, we started at whatever, 2,800-ish calories. That's going to be the same for someone starting at 25, 2,400 calories if genetically that's where their true maintenance slight caloric surplus is.
sure, yeah, no, those are all important, all important considerations. So yeah,
Yeah,
and
now,
then
like, sorry. So certainly
oh, go
some
ahead.
people's metabolisms are more efficient, and that's not a good thing. So typically, those are the people that
Right,
consume more calories without gaining body fat, which is great. But then what that means is typically that person is going to have to get pushed harder in a fat loss phase because their body is more efficient at using those calories. So you actually want a less efficient metabolism, again, genetically, when you're losing body fat, because there's a good chance you kind of have to do less. So,
right. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting when we get down to the end, come October and whatever, where we're going to be at. It's going to be really cool to see if cardio and calories are very similar to where they were at last time, and we'll be talking about this more, right, along the way, but definitely will be interesting. But yeah, and as far as, training has been going, like I've seen a little bit of a dip in energy and strength, but it's just like a little bit. Like I've been maintaining that very well. Muscle fullness is good, pumps are good. So it's like we're not at that place where you're in prep and it's just like it's like a slog going through your workouts, right? But things are going well. Cardio still very, very effective. Like it's definitely moderate intensity, right? Like today was my last cardio session of the week, and it was treadmill walking, but it wasn't leisurely stroll, sweating all over the place,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
so I know
yeah.
it was an efficient session, right? And
Yeah, we need, at a certain point, we need to create that metabolic disruption, right? Like, yeah, leisurely
oh
walking,
yeah,
great up to a certain point. And then me personally, my personal feelings around it is if you're between 8 and 10,000 steps a day, or 8 to 12, let's say, on average, that is, you don't need to do any more leisurely walking. Like that is more than
Yeah,
enough. The adaptation that your body has gone through with that, it is going to be so hard and it's going to take up so much of your time to create more of that. I don't think it's very sustainable. And so
sure.
that's where I'd like to add in some more of that medium metabolic. Let's disrupt the body a little bit more. But again, if we're looking at this hierarchy when it comes to fat loss, it's going to be creating a calorie deficit, weight training, recovery, and then your cardio. Like that's kind of at the bottom a little bit in the sense of, how much do we actually really need?
Right. No, I'm with you there. And that first thing where you talk about the leisurely walking, 8 to 10K steps, yeah, I mean, it would be so time consuming to get, I don't know, triple that or whatever if you want some kind
Yeah.
of effect, right?
Like I've
Um,
done 30,000 steps in a day. Like that's hard.
yeah, that is hard. I don't track my step count. It'll probably be pretty depressing some days, especially as coaches when we're working all day. It's like, you know
Yeah.
what? I've got my cardio. Additional steps are bonus. Like I look at it more like the psychological benefit of going for a 5 minute stroll outside, right? But it's not to get something else to happen, right? But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I mean, I think we went over a lot here that the viewers really could benefit from, right? And we're going to be tracking everything all along the way, documenting everything, guys. So weekly updates on my YouTube channel. We'll do our monthly chat here. And also make sure to subscribe to both of our channels, right, Tyler?
Sure.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's it. Any other final thoughts, things I forgot to mention here, or we pretty much covered it?
I'm not going to do any more sad bicep flexes.
Okay, yeah.